we're receiving a ton more information, or not a ton, it's more of a drip, 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 as I mentioned in headlines, about the complete failure of a response from the Uvalde police when it came to the massacre at Robb Elementary School. The Texas Tribune came out with a piece yesterday reporting on how the Uvalde cops were inside of the school with all of their gear, with shields, with rifles, and they were stationed outside of the classrooms where the shooter was massacring children. So the piecing together of this information, it just gets more damning by the day. There's currently testimony that's happening, so we're receiving this information in pieces. But the AP is reporting that the Texas police commander said officers could have stopped the gunman within 3 minutes in Uvalde. The public safety chief, who I believe we'll be hearing from in a second, Steve McCraw, said that the classroom door in the shooting was not locked, even though cops were waiting for a key. What's the point of having all that gear on if you can't kick down a damn door? I probably could do it with a few people in street clothes. And these cops didn't do it with all of their gear on. But here is the public safety director, Steve McCraw, testifying on what happened here. And Matt pointed out before the show, he seems a little shaky. And that's because Texas officials are not used to being in opposition to the police, but this is so egregious that...
Yeah, I mean, cops don't like to criticize cops, particularly in Texas.
Here he is talking about, in no uncertain terms, how awful the Uvalde police response was.
There's compelling evidence that the law enforcement response to the attack at Robb Elementary was an abject failure and antithetical to everything we've learned over the last 2 decades since the Columbine massacre. 3 minutes after the subject entered the West Building, there was a sufficient number of armed officers wearing body armor to isolate, distract, and neutralize the subject. The only thing stopping a hallway of dedicated officers from entering room 111 and 112 was the on-scene commander, who decided to place the lives of officers before the lives of children. The officers had weapons, the children had none. The officers had body armor, the children had none. The officers had training, the subject had none. 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 8 seconds. That's how long the children waited and the teachers waited in rooms 111 to be rescued. And while they waited, the on-scene commander waited for a radio and rifles. Then he waited for shields. Then he waited for SWAT. Lastly, he waited for a key that was never needed. The post-Columbine doctrine is clear and compelling and unambiguous. Stop the killing, stop the dying. You can't do the former unless you can't do the latter unless you do the former. Certainly, some things were done well, and even very well. The teachers quickly implemented active shooter protocols prior to the subject gaining entry. In fact, one teacher was able to call 911 and report that before the subject entered the campus.
So that point at the end there is key because the cops have been, with the aid of Republican politicians, frankly, trying to blame teachers for not following protocols, effectively rocks in the door, which ended up being a lie, teachers not being efficient enough in the midst of their panic and sheer terror as a shooter comes towards them unarmed. They weren't good enough at locking the doors. But in fact, actually, they followed the safety protocols pretty much to the T. Pretty much to the T, even though the fact that they are burdened with such protocols is unconscionable in and of itself. It was the cops It was the cops that didn't follow any of their own rules.
And these are rules that are written down. Like, in addition, we're going to, in the fun half, talk about Joe Rogan and some fascists talk about how this is because defund the police, emasculated police. But Uvalde, 40% did not defund the police. And in fact, 40% of that city's budget goes to those cops. And they have extra funding and training for specifically this contingency, and like the policies were explicitly confront the attacker, time is the number one enemy, immediate action can have dramatic impact on reducing casualties, and prioritizing innocent lives over officer lives. That's on the books.
Yeah.
And they just don't care because cops have apologists like Joe Rogan and all these Republicans that will bend over backwards even when other cops are saying, yeah, they let kids die because they were afraid. They waited for a key they didn't need to go into a room that wasn't locked because they were afraid.
And that's the reality, because they're also lying to hide their cowardice.
Which is even, I think, bigger emergency, honestly.
Well, I mean, it's also like the testimony there from Public Safety Director Steve McCraw, that's good. Does it change your opinion at all on the structure of policing in this country? Because it should. Cops lie all the damn time. All the time. They lie like they're breathing. They lie like fishes.
And not like you lie about, like, I don't know.
I'm out sick to work today.
Yeah, they lie over dead bodies.
Yeah, and this is what they did here. The San Antonio Express News reported that there was no evidence that the officers actually tried the doors in rooms 111 and 112, which is what the police chief said. There was no key that was necessary. That's what we're finding out now. Yesterday, the Austin American Statesman reported that the officers did have all the equipment that was necessary to break into the classrooms, which should be obvious, but it's part of the information that's being pieced together right here. The New York Times also has been doing some reporting on this, but the Texas Tribune is on the case as well. And that's what's necessary here, because they're trying to wait out the national news coverage. There needs to be more local reporting from the Tribune, but even more local than that, like the Austin American Statesman, the San Antonio Express News, which Uvalde is decently close to, because these are the kinds of this is the kind of reporting and local news reporting that will be there for the months and months that the cops try to filibuster this investigation into. They try to kick the can down the road so that they don't face accountability, because they're used to lying and they're used to not having any accountability. But the problem here is that there's 19 dead children, and hopefully there continues to be sunlight on this, and hopefully it leads to a broader reckoning with policing in this country. Unfortunately, Democrats on the national, federal level are so afraid of being called anti-cop that they have not made the connection here, which I think is so common sense, that this is why defund the police is actually pretty good concept. Because this is indicative of larger policing problems in America. And this is the rule. It's not the exception, the way that they conduct themselves here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the just sort of philosophizing over the defund the police slogan, from my perspective, I understand people that want to, like India Walton says, we want to emphasize that we are reinvesting and not just taking money out, because frankly, like, rich liberals can see, defund the police, I'll save. The same reason why, like, people like Tulsi Gabbard like to defund the military, because they just want less taxes. But ultimately, like, there's an organizational problem that is deeper than reforms can get. We have specifically on the book saying prioritize the lives of children over your own lives, and the cops sat there not doing that.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, that's a key example about reform and, like, the liberal proclivity for that kind of tweak being not enough.